Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I don't normally accept random friend requests from guys on Facebook, but when Tommy messaged me out of the blue, he seemed nice enough. We chatted about movies and music for a bit before he asked if I'd like to meet up for dinner. I hesitated at first. My friends always warned me about meeting strangers from the internet. But Tommy appeared respectful, and after scrolling through his pictures with normal-looking friends and family, I decided to take a chance. We made plans to meet up that weekend at Tandoori Palace, this Indian restaurant downtown I'd been wanting to try. I arrived 10 minutes early and slid into a booth facing the door so I could watch for him. As the door chimes jingled, my stomach fluttered anxiously each time. I had no idea what Tommy looked like besides a tiny, faded profile pic. To calm my nerves while I waited, I perused the menu, mouth watering at the array of aromatic curry dishes. When a tall, athletic guy with warm brown eyes scanned the room uncertainly before making his way over, I just knew it was him. "Sarah," he asked with a surprisingly endearing grin, showcasing straight white teeth. We exchanged awkward hellos, both admitting it was our first blind date. But Tommy's smile put me at ease as we settled in. He told me all about his boring accounting job while I regaled him with tales of life as a freelance writer. When I confessed a humiliating story of chickening out of giving a speech at my sister's wedding, Tommy threw his head back and laughed loud and long. The ice was officially broken after that. Before we knew it, our samosas and curries had been cleared and the check delivered. That's when Tommy shifted awkwardly, rubbing his neck as he stared at his laugh. "Wow, awkward," he mumbled. But I totally forgot my wallet at home. He gave me such a helpless, pleading look that I couldn't help but laugh. It was like the worst first date cliche come to life. Still chuckling, I waved away his profuse apologies while I grabbed for my card. He seemed so genuinely flustered while patting down his empty pockets that I found the whole thing rather amusing. When Tommy insisted on paying me back and even left his license as collateral, something about his brown eyes shone with such sincerity that I really didn't mind covering dinner in the end. As we walked to our cars afterwards, Tommy cleared his throat self-consciously. "Can I take you out again to make it up to you?" he asked, scuffing his shoe like an apprehensive schoolboy. When I smiled and agreed, his whole face lit up once more. Over the next few weeks, Tommy and I fell into an easy routine of dinners, movie nights, and long, wandering phone conversations. Even on nights apart, he'd entertain me by texting funny memes or random observations from his dull accounting office. I found myself smiling giddily whenever his name popped up on my phone and gushed endlessly to my friends about this unexpected whirlwind romance. About a month in, Tommy picked me up to go grab Mexican food. We were bantering as usual when his smile abruptly vanished again. "So, funny thing," he mumbled, back to staring at his shoes. I'm normally not this scatterbrained, but seems I forgot my wallet. Again, he let out an uncomfortable chuckle. My own smile slid off instantly, replaced by an uneasy churning in my gut. What were the odds of one guy just happening to forget his wallet repeatedly? As irritation flared within me, Tommy quickly offered, "Hey, no problem though. I'll just duck in real quick and order while you wait here." My instincts screamed not to let this man out of my sight, so I forced my tense lips into an exaggerated smile instead. "Wow, we're just both so forgetful lately, aren't we?" I said brightly. "Why don't we reschedule instead?" Tommy's eyes narrowed slightly, but he readily agreed. When he leaned in for a goodbye kiss, I hastily offered my cheek instead while reaching for the door handle behind me. Immense relief flooded through me as I drove off, and immediately swung into a nearby parking lot just out of view. I'm not sure what compelled me in that moment, but something told me to double back. I crept along slowly until I could peer to the restaurant windows once more, and there was Tommy strolling casually up to the hostess, wallet clearly visible in hand now as he laughed wholeheartedly beside her. My blood instantly went ice-cold taking in this harmless-looking stranger chatting up the girl with such ease only minutes after claiming to have no money. Handshaking, I sped off with an ugly mix of fury and unease churning inside me. Later at home, still disturbed by what I saw, I messaged Tommy demanding he repay me ASA for those 2 unpaid meals. But his responses turned cold and aggressive when confronted, peppered suddenly with profanity. When I threatened to report him, he lashed out further, saying I had zero proof of his alleged claims. Blocking Tommy brought instant peace of mind at least, but unease continued plating me about his intentions had I not listened to my intuition. I ended up rethinking my entire approach to first dates moving forward, a hard lesson that outward charm doesn't always reflect someone's true nature inside, and to always trust that inner voice telling you when friendly eyes aren't what they seem. I was pretty pumped when Amy agreed to meet up for dinner. We had matched on Tinder a few weeks back and had some nice banter over text. She seemed cool with a great sense of humor about life, and way out of my league looks-wise, yet somehow into me. When she suggested meeting someplace nice in central London, I eagerly agreed despite my limited budget. I was just excited that she wanted to see me again in real life after hitting off messaging. We planned to meet at a trendy cafe in Soho. I arrived ridiculously early, sliding into a tiny table tucked in the back corner. Fidgeting nervously, I scanned the room, trying not to appear as anxious as I felt. Every chime of the entry door made my pulse quicken. When Amy finally walked in, my jaw nearly hit the floor. She looked like a runway model, chic outfit, perfect bouncy hair, just enough makeup to accentuate her striking eyes. Next to gangly me in my old band tee I hadn't changed since college, we probably looked hilarious together. But if she noticed or cared, Amy didn't show it as she glided right over with a radiant smile. We exchanged slightly awkward pleasantries, both admitting it was in fact our very first blind date ever. As the hostess handed us sleek leather menus, I scanned the dizzying list of exotic fare and nearly choked. These were easily the highest prices I'd ever seen. My entire modest week's grocery budget wouldn't cover a third of one entree here. Trying not to hyperventilate imagining the impending bill, I went for the very cheapest salad on offer and tap water. Meanwhile, stunning Amy selected the prettiest items without even blinking: lobster, premium steak, an artisanal cheese platter nearly equal to my whole meal. I tried not to visibly wince and attempted focusing on our conversation instead. Despite the stuffy opulence that had me feeling wildly out of place, Amy seemed perfectly at home. Between bites of decadent food, she regaled me with hilarious stories of her PR agency that had me enthralled. Her wind chime laughter every time I managed to crack a joke sounded like music to my ears. As afternoon faded to evening, I found myself getting entirely lost in her sparkling emerald eyes. The awkwardness I initially felt melted away as we chatted for hours like old friends. Any lingering first date nerves gave way to breathless exhilaration that this literal goddess seemed sincerely into me for some reason. Somehow on this fancy first date, things were effortlessly, unexpectedly perfect between us. Until that is, the weighty black bill folder landed abruptly on the tablecloth between us. Heart in my throat, I cracked it open, bracing for astronomical damage. But nothing prepared me for the actual total, nearly 100 pounds. Way beyond even my most wildly inflated estimate in mind. Breaking into a sweat, I frantically tried calculating if I had enough credit left to cover this splurge. Just then Amy spoke again, snapping me from financial panic mode with that dazzling smile. "Oh wow, crazy pricey here. Hope you don't mind getting this." 1. Something about the melodic lilt of her voice short-circuited my brain. Before I knew it, I was nodding dumbly, uttering of course, without a second thought. In my starry-eyed stupor over this girl, I wasn't remotely prepared when Amy asked eagerly if we could pop into Selfridges down the block quickly. I just want to, quote, window shop. Too intoxicated by her attention to think straight, I obediently trailed her through the opulent department store, white-knuckled fists stuffed nervously in my pockets the whole time. In the glittering shoe department, Amy let out a gasp that made me jump skittishly. Aren't these dire sneakers just gorgeous? She gave me a smile so disarming I temporarily lost all basic reasoning abilities. Want to buy them for me, so I'll always remember our special first date, she added with a playful yet pleading little pout. And despite the staggering 900 pounds price tag, I somehow found myself maxing out my only credit card to fulfill her wish. Something in those shimmering green eyes made me feel I'd move heaven and earth if it kept that dazzling smile of hers in place. Just seeing her thrilled reaction as she planted a kiss on my flaming cheek was worth every penny at the time. In a stupor, I somehow made it home, collapsing in overwhelmed disbelief once in the safe solitude of my tiny flat. What had come over me, blowing literally thousands in one night just to keep an almost stranger momentarily pleased? In the harsh clarity of day, I fully recognized my reckless stupidity. Sheepishly, I texted Amy suggesting maybe coffee or a park for our next date, something more aligned with my modest budget. But I got only cold silence in response. Days turned to weeks without a single word from her. The fantasy I'd wrapped Amy up in shattered brutally. As reality set in, part of my innocence withered for good. To her, I'd been nothing but a walking credit card and overeager fool, too caught up in dazzling eyes to spot the obvious signs. My bank account may one day recover from that nightmare first date and its brutal monetary aftermath. But my bruised optimism when it comes to beautiful strangers, that foolish look might take a lot longer to bounce back once burned so bitterly by ignored red flags. Beauty had blinded me to ulterior motives lurking just underneath the surface, a mistake I don't plan on repeating again anytime soon. I was really looking forward to my date with Mason. We had met at a work conference a few weeks back and totally hit it off right away. He was cute in a dorky, unassuming way and made me laugh nonstop with his super dry, witty banter over the boring seminar speakers. So when he asked for my number and later asked if I'd like to catch a movie that weekend, I readily agreed. I love films and Mason seemed like he'd be fun company. Plus it had been far too long since my last date. We made plans to meet at a theater that Friday evening. I arrived early and loitered awkwardly by the ticket counter, smoothing my dress and trying not to seem overeager. Right on time, I noticed Mason waving at me enthusiastically as he crossed the lobby. I had to admit, he cleaned up even nicer out of his business casual conference attire. Mason gave me a slightly awkward quick hug paired with an endearingly shy smile. As we perused the movie listings, I was thankful when he insisted on me choosing the film. He didn't even make a single complaint when I picked some ultra-cheesy romance movie over the action flick I knew he likely preferred. What a gentleman, I thought to myself, chatting easily as we grabbed our tickets. We stopped at the concession area where Mason insisted on paying for a large popcorn for us to share and 2 sodas. As we headed down the dim corridor, searching for our assigned theater, I felt him rest his hand lightly on my lower back, as if to guide me. The context surprised me initially, but I shrugged it off, assuming it was just an innocuous, subtle gesture. Settling into our plush red seats, I jokingly plopped the popcorn bag right between us, a makeshift divider for now. As the cheesy previews rolled, Mason kept leaning over to whisper amusing commentary about the absurd upcoming releases. His hand would accidentally graze my thigh now and then as he reached for popcorn. I'd shift subtly away each time, but again dismissed it as unintentional. But about halfway into the film during a quieter moment, Mason casually lifted his arm and draped it fully across the back of my seat, a tensed annoyance flaring. Was he really trying that fake yawn maneuver? Before I could fully process this thought, though, he confidently dropped his hand directly onto my knee. He'd me a firm, possessive squeeze. I froze, skin crawling at his sudden, overly familiar touch. My mind raced as I sat there rigidly. Was I totally misreading innocent gestures, making too big a deal over what guys just normally do on dates? I attempted shifting as subtly as possible away, pointedly brushing his hand off me. Heart pounding now, I stared fixedly at the screen, willing myself to keep calm and just relax. But only seconds later, I felt Mason's fingers slowly trail up my arm, landing on my bare shoulder. I recoiled sharply at this, but he only took it as an invitation to slide even closer. My stomach lurched as his cheap cologne assaulted my senses now. And when I felt his hot, starchy breath right up against the side of my neck, real panic finally set in. Without thinking twice, I forcefully shoved him away and instantly bolted for the glowing exit sign behind us. Bursting out into the empty, brightly lit lobby, I made a beeline for the guest services desk on trembling legs. The bored attendant perked up in surprise, seeing my obvious distress. I choked out what happened in a kind of breathless rush, one hand grasping the edge of her desk just to stay upright at this point. Though apathetic at first, she assured me security would handle Mason and escorted me to a quiet seating area to wait after I nearly broke down in relief. Pacing anxiously in the small side room, I kept replaying those awful moments in my mind. Had I somehow given him the wrong impression? Sent mixed signals. I racked my brain wondering if I was unreasonable just fleeing like that without a word. Before I could spiral too far, two very imposing, broad-shouldered security guards finally emerged through the lobby doors. The larger one kindly led me safely outside while his partner headed off to presumably haul Mason out from the darkness of the theater. I sagged against the building, breathing deeply in profound relief as I watched cars pull in and out, waiting at my Uber. But even during my blessedly uneventful ride home, anger and frustration continued churning inside me. I replayed every moment of our encounter obsessively, second-guessing my reactions. Some toxic little inner voice whispered I must have done something to encourage his behavior somehow, until I finally choked off that loaded thought process for good. No, Mason's repeated boundary crossing was the only inexcusable thing here. End of story. For a while after the incident, I'll admit I found myself battling irrational suspiciousness when meeting new guys. But in time, I regained confidence in trusting my instincts again. Because I'm worthy of respect on first dates and beyond, no matter what. And no one gets to coerce or bully past lines I'm drawing for my own space and comfort. This whole mess taught me that when crossed wires do attempt blurring consent, walking away is always the right call. No matter what flimsy excuses that shaming inner critic tries spewing to plant seeds of self-doubt. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.